We're going to go over problems 9 and 10 and talk about y equals absolute value of a function, or y equals the function of the absolute value of x. So what's the difference of these two things? So the absolute value of f of x means we do this function first, and then we take the absolute value of all of the y values that come out, and then that's what we end up doing. So this is the function. And so what ends up happening is I'm just going to take whatever the values are here and then do the absolute value of them. So what's the absolute value of this y value? Still 1. Still here, still here, still here, still here. Now, once we get underneath the axis, I need to take the absolute value of those things. So when I get -1, -4, that's going to become -1, 4. So what ends up happening is I take the absolute value of all of these y values. I'll try that again and graph it just a little bit better. And I did it just as poorly. I think now is evidence that I should just use the line, "Oh, bless you, Evelyn." So we have this situation here. So this is what the graph of absolute value of f of x looks like for this function. Then I have y equals f times the absolute value of x, or not times, f of the absolute value of x. Well, this means we take the absolute value of whatever the x value is, then put it back into the function. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I look at this point, which has 5 as my x value. The absolute value of 5 is 5, and so that stays here. The absolute value of 3 is 3, so that stays here. And all of those kind of stay in the same spot that they were in. So that's what this looks like. But then what happens over here? Well, what happens if I substitute in -4 into this thing? I get y equals f of the absolute value of -4. Well, that's equal to f of 4. F of 4 was equal to 0. So that means when I sub in -4, I'm going to get 0. What happens if I sub in -3? Well, I end up with f of 3. So f of 3 was -1. So if I'm making a t-table, when I plug in -4, that becomes whatever the function value is at 4, which is 0. -3, when I plug that in, I get whatever the function value was at 3, which is -1. And so basically what I'm noticing here is that my graph actually is going to start looking a whole lot like the graph looked like over here. And then if I sub in, well, I have to actually care about the domain here. So is there a value -5 in the domain? No, so I have to stop it. So like it has to stop. But basically what I'm noticing is if I look at this graph, this reflects over the x-axis and this reflects over the y-axis. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like on Desmos, not this one, but this one. So I just have this function graphed. If I take the absolute value of f of x, notice that all of my y values get flipped over the axis. And so only the things that are underneath the axis get flipped. So it kind of looks like that. Whereas if I take f of the absolute value of x, this has everything that's a negative x value. It basically just mirrors the y values on the other side. So that's kind of what this looks like.